Okay, so for today's example, I'm going to use Simon's model. So let's just open that all up here. Oops, that's not what I want to open. Go File, Open. Okay, so you can see within Simon's model, he's got a variety of bodies. And hold on one second. No, get over there. Well, I can leave right at the door. Sorry about that. The dogs are being spastic. Okay, so a variety of individual bodies within the model. And the goal is to get these all broken out into individual components, and then create an assembly about with that. The biggest difference between a part with multiple bodies in it and the assembly is that you can move each one of these bodies independently into different spaces. You can align them. You can create mates so that this steering wheel will rotate. These levers would go up and down without kind of moving things around. They would also allow you to, if you want to, when it comes time to do a drawing, each part then can be brought in and used as a drawing and create dimensions for it. You can still edit all the components in the assembly. Because what it does is every time you do it, it reference backs to your main body. You can also move things around, do a variety of things. Now, one of the things that we'll go through too is because it can be cumbersome to go through and get all of these out saved as an individual part, because there's a lot of things here. When doing your 3D modeling, if you can, remember that, as you export these two buttons are identical. And I believe, for the most part, at this stage, these buttons aren't going to change. So the right one is never going to be different than the left one. So we don't actually need to save out both buttons. What we can do is save out one, and then in the model, we'll duplicate it in the assembly and put it in its right location. So same as all the other components that are identical, as well as if we have screws and things that are in a circular pattern. So you created a circular pattern here. Ideally, we would just bring in one of these and then place it into the assembly and do the circular pattern again there. And the reason for that is because your circular pattern that you created in your model doesn't transfer over, only the components. So we would actually only be able to select one of these. Oh, never mind. They're all one part. Okay, so we can bring that all in as one. But if there are components that are part of a linear pattern or a circular pattern, you can do that and create that in the assembly. And one of the 4-minute videos in the link that I sent will show how to take a body and make it into a linear part. So let's just walk through, and I want to show you a couple things that you want to do with each component. So first things first, in order to get these bodies into an assembly, each body has to be its own part. So here we have this whole thing is one giant part. And this is going to be called the parent model, which means that everything is an offspring of this one part. So when I create this and I right click on it and I go insert into new part, it's going to take that body and place it small hex into a new part file. And then it's going to ask me to save a new name. Bear with me. And you can see what it does is it keeps the full name of the file and then actually the identification name that you've created for that in the body. Now, for normal companies, when you would do a naming convention, this would probably be considerably shorter because you're not going to need your name in it, product redesign, final. They will give you a part number to assign to it. Every company is going to have a slightly different naming convention or slightly different folder system. The nice thing is right now, or the pain is right now, when you guys have other teachers, we may be asking you to do something all a little bit different, which is good because you have to learn to be adaptable. But when you get into a corporate setting, they'll usually have that all laid out for you. And if you're doing filing and stuff like that, you would have a little book that would say, hey, this is how we do things. Consultancies may have modifications on that because their clients may say, we need it done this way, because they could care less about how the consultancy names it. When they get the files, they want it. So however, and as a customer-client relationship, if my client says do this and it's a pain in my butt, I'm going to do it. I may charge them a little extra, but I'm still going to do it. So in here, you can change the name for whatever you want. My main thing is I'm not necessarily concerned about what all the individual components are called within your major assembly. But when it comes time to save the assembly file, then yeah, I would want it to have the same naming convention that we've been using. So basically what you do is you come in, you save that part, and now you've got a completely separate part. If I want to edit this, so you can see over here, I no longer have a menu tree. There's nothing left in it. If I want to edit this part, I'll right click and I'll go edit in context. And the context is the parent model. So I can come here, wait for it, and then it shows this. So if I have this model closed, and I'm working on just this part, I can come in, edit context. It's going to find where that model is and put it in. So that's the parent-child relationship. That was also something that I kind of pointed out. When you send an assembly file, all the parts have to come, especially this main body, because the assembly looks at the individual components that go into the assembly, and then the individual components that are in the assembly need your parent model. And that's kind of why doing the pack and go, really helps. And I'll show you that a little bit later again, because it will make sure that everything you need gets zipped into that one file. So really the key thing here is go through, you're going to select on each body, and you're going to insert it into a new part, and you're going to just keep doing that. It'll ask to save it. Try to give it a name. Right, left handle. And you're just going to do that for all of them to get them all opened. And then once you have them all opened, or all saved as individual parts, bear with, oh man. Does anybody else have a problem where all of a sudden SolidWorks just freezes up on you a fair bit? Or is that just me?
All the time. Constant.
Yeah, I got a lot of problems.
Okay.
Mine crashes a lot. I counted, and in 30 minutes, it crashed a total of 18 times at once.
Okay. Bear with me then, because the only way I can seem to kill it is through my task manager. So that's something else to learn about SolidWorks. SolidWorks will release a version, and then what they have is service packs that come afterwards. And the service packs to fix all the bugs. You will see that some corporations, even though SolidWorks 2020 is out, some corporations will not go up to 2020 until like the fourth or fifth service pack, because by the time they get to the end of the year, they've just worked out all the bugs. And then when the new version comes out, there's so many bugs in it. So companies are very slow to just, oh, new version is out, let's install it. For this reason, because there are so many bugs at times. Okay, so let me close this out.
Yeah, that happens with Apple like a lot. And
Yeah,
like I usually don't update for like the first 3 months. Like I know iOS whatever comes out in like September. I don't usually update till like December.
yeah. And most companies that you work at will have a individual. It may not be the IT person, but they will have a CAD software administrator or someone who's in charge of making sure the updates are all done, all those things. Life lesson: do not ever independently at a company decide, oh, hey, I'm going to upgrade, even if you have those capabilities. At the last company I was at, one of the designers decided to do that on his own. He opened up a entire go to production engineering assembly, and then was just looking at it for whatever reason. I don't know why. Then they saved it for whatever reason. I don't know why, because they didn't actually touch anything. But because they opened it up in a newer version, the version that the engineers were using that was a year older, they could no longer open up that file. So it was completely useless to them. There was a whole lot of rework, and then there was a whole lot of spanking, and then there was a whole lot of no designer is allowed to touch an engineering file ever again. So just pay attention to that stuff. Okay, so I'm going to come in and we're going to say that I've saved out all of those components already. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, look, I saved all those parts. Let's open them up. Hold on a second here. Let me go back one because I'm missing a part. What the hey? Oh, I'll be mad. Huh. Okay, well, we'll try to figure that out in a second. Okay, so I'm going to open up all these parts. Bear with me while it opens them. I didn't need to open them all. Okay, so we've got all the parts open, and I guess we didn't necessarily need to open them all, but I did want to do this to show you one method of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to go new, and I'm going to create an assembly.
Does it matter which part you do first for the assembly?
No, it doesn't. because there's a couple different things. One of the ways that I'm going to show you is, so I can come in and just put any part in here. If I just click on the part and drop it in, you'll see that it is just in space and not necessarily where it needs to be. Let me just turn on, oops. If for some reason your planes in that are showing up as, you know, they're supposed to be on, like you can see, if I click on it, my option is to hide it, but I don't see it. What you can do is come up to View, go to Hide Show, and for some reason this overrides what's in your menu tree. For here, I'm just going to come down and I'm going to turn on Planes, and I'm going to turn on my origin. So you can see that with this part, it's not necessarily, I don't think it is, in its location that it should be. So I'm just going to delete that. Component. I'm going to take a slightly different approach to doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Window. I'm going to show them all up. And I'm not going to do these all, so let me just close some of them.
I was just wondering if you're recording this.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So what I can do is I can just open up the part. I can grab it at the main body part, and then I can just drag it around and place it in here. Now you can still see how it's not in its proper orientation in the way that Simon built it. And I can't move it right now because it's fixed in space. You can see that by it has the little F. If I want to move that, I have to go to Float, which of course F and F. And then that allows me to move it around in space. And from there, I would have to ideally put it in the proper space that it was built on. If I took all my time to build my original model around the origin, then I want to get it back to there. So for this, I would most likely have to take this plane, align it with this plane, and do a variety of other things to get it in its perfect spot. Now, if I come in and drag it, and I go and I place it over top of the origin, you can see that it automatically snaps. So let me just do that again. So if I click on here, you can see there's an origin for this part. That origin is from the master model, and it lines up with this. So if I click on that, you can see I can't snap to it because I've already brought it in. But, let me delete that out. If I put it on the origin when I first bring it in, and all I have to do, it's not lining up the two origins, it's lining up my mouse, and it'll automatically snap to there. Now, when we talk about, you know, I'm not sure who said it, but, you know, does it matter what part we bring in? It doesn't. You can start with anything. I like to try to take a systematic approach. So you could say it's best practices, or it's best practices for me. If there is a component that I built around, or that my model is built around, that everything else kind of ties to it, then that would probably be the first one I would bring in. So as I was playing with Simon's model, for me, it felt like this primary plate was the main part of the model, and it felt like everything just kind of attached onto there. So that was why I chose that personally. And then basically what you're going to do is you can continue to bring the parts in. And again, you can see how it just snaps there. I usually close these as I go. Sorry. And I'm going to just keep bringing the parts in and placing them where they need to go. Let me just see if I can do something here. File, open. Where did my assembly go? Let me just try to find something here. File, open recently. Because just before this class, I had put the entire assembly together. But I don't know where it went now. Okay, so there's no assembly there. No assembly there. Ah, there we go. For some reason, I put it on my desktop. So, just like in Illustrator, so you know, when I create this assembly and I save this assembly somewhere, it has to know where those files are. So wherever I created those files or saved them and inserted them, it's going to go back there and look for it. So if I was to go and take all those parts and move them to a different folder and then try to open the assembly would not know where the parts are and it won't open it up for you. Much like in Illustrator when you put images into the file as links, if you're to move those images, it breaks the links. Does everybody understand that principle?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the full assembly. And you can see, so I brought everything in, and because I snapped it to the origin, everything is fixed. So that's a really nice, quick way to get things in and not having to use mates or anything. Everything came into the exact position that we wanted it. Now, that's not always reality. So let me unfix these so that they're floating. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a few things on how to get them into their proper position. So I am still going to take this main face and I'm going to lock that because that's the one I want everything to go around. So you can see here, I can click on this object. It's no longer mated or fixed in space. So I can move it everywhere and anywhere. Let me turn off multiple components here. Okay, so we'll come back and we'll turn on, let me just see something here. Shoot, there we go. So what we'll do is we'll turn on the hub. And you can see that it can move all over the place. What I can also do is you can see how in the assembly that this model was built, it had all the planes aligned and the same. So this is part of the reason why it's nice to build things off of a common plane and background. These planes are for the assembly. These planes are for the part. But you can kind of see how they're all over the place. I want to make sure that this part is aligned with this because I don't really have anything to stick it to. I can easily say, you know what? I want this part to be right up against this face. What I can do is a couple things. I know that this plane and this plane are in the same space within the part. So I can select the two planes. I can come up and go mate. And what it does is it automatically, by default, it makes it go coincident, which means that it comes into contact. So this plane for this object is attached to this plane. If I hit select, now what you'll see is I can still move it all over the place. And this is where it gets deceptive. I can move it all over the place, left, right. I can move it up and I can move it up and down, but I cannot move it front and back, because what I've just told the computer is this plane and this plane must always be mated. So that's one way of doing it. Now, the moment you create a mate, down here in the bottom, you will see a new thing that says mates, and you click on it. So it's just like a feature. I can click on it and it shows me that mate that I'm looking at. I can right click and I can edit it. So let's say for some reason I wanted this to be a certain distance away from that front plane or that surface. What I can then do is I can make it a dimension. And I can have a little bit more control. If I wanted to do it at an angle, I could do it at an angle. Whole bunch of different things. I could say that, you know what? I don't want it to be locked coincidence. I just want it so that it's always parallel. So now I can move it in every direction I want, but it will always be parallel. So for this, we're going to just say the planes match and it's coincident. But we can also, and we won't get into advanced mates right now. Hold on, let me just get out of there. Mates are very valuable to name, just because when you start moving things around, they don't make any sense. So you can, just like any other part, you can name the mates. But for this, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to go delete. Because really, what I prefer to do is I can do the planes, but I can also do surfaces. So I can select that surface, hit Control, left mouse button. I can select that surface. So now we have the two surfaces. Right click, go to my mate, and it puts it on there. Now, still not centered, still not up and down. But for this design, I know that I do want it to be in that proper location. So I'm just going to come here. I'll select this. The mates are there. The next is that I wanted to have it the right height. So again, because I know that these parts were all built with the same origin, I can click on there, and it's going to align it. So now what I've done is this part is fully mated. I cannot move it anywhere. Now, eventually, I'll show you something, because what I may want to do is I can't move it, but what I may want to do here down the road I'll show you how to do that later. It's something I have to do in the next step. I was going to show how to rotate it, but I want to rotate everything at once. So what we can now do is, let me just find one of the components that is what I want. Not dust cover. Sorry, I don't know the part. Oh, there we go, pins. Okay, so we've got the pins. Now, instead of doing all the planes, because sometimes you're not going to have the planes, they're not going to be in the exact same part, especially if you take the approach, instead of doing the parent model that I showed you guys how to do, where you build all the components into one giant model, what some companies will have you do is build each part individually, and then you bring it into the assembly. And there, at that point, and I'll show you this the next class, but it's not as, or later, it's not as important because that's not the approach we took. There, you're not going to have the same origin for all parts. So you'll have to use these different ways of mating without worrying about the planes. But what I can do is, just like in a sketch, I can say, okay, well, this needs to be dead center of this circle. So what I'm going to do is I'll take this face and I'll take this face, and when I come into mates now, it gives me different options than I had before because they are concentric. So I can do it where it is tangent to that, so you can see that this face now is tangent to that face. Or I can go with concentric, which is what we want. We'll hit accept, and then you can see now I can't go anywhere other than back and forth, but I can also, you can see I can rotate because I don't have anything defining that yet. So what I'll do next, click that face and that face. So there, I can't go anywhere else, but it can still, hold on, stop. The part can still rotate. So you can see by not necessarily locking everything down, you can still have motion. And you can control that motion and say, I only wanted that to rotate 90 degrees. I could have that. We'll get into that later because right now I'm not worried about you guys doing, those are called advanced mates. But it does help later on if you want to do an animation in SolidWorks or something to that effect. You can do it. Or even if in the presentation of your model, let's say you've got a door and you want to show it opening and closing or the hinge, it's always nice to be able to do that in your model. So as we continue, we've got a whole bunch of other mates that we can do. So the same thing, if I pull up one of the buttons, you can see that I only brought in one of the buttons. Now, it happened to be in its location. Oops, hold on. I got to bring in the button cover. Where's that? There we go. That's what I need. Okay. So these are the covers that the buttons fit into. So again, you can kind of see, hey, I need this part to be mated first before I can bring this part in. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We know that it's going to sit on that face. So for this one, we'll select those faces. Go to our mate. And it aligns there perfectly. Now, we would want to center this. And this is where you can start seeing if you did not start with a particular origin and you just started modeling in space, this is where it would become extremely difficult for you to align things up. So even though I may not remember to tell you guys why I'm making you do things, trust me that sometimes there's a reason why I'm doing it. And sometimes it's just because, I don't know, it's how I like it. So I'm going to grab that mate, that face, or that plane, right click, hit the mate. It lines it up. Now what I can also do is I can write, oops, let's exit out of there. We're going to take that plane, made it. Now what we can do is we can take this button, and again we can go, I need it to be concentric with here. It automatically makes it. or makes it concentric. So we'll want to put that on there. And it seems tedious, and to be honest with you, it is. But what we can now do is, so we only brought in one of those buttons because we don't need the whole lot of extra parts. So, but what we can do, let me just close these up, is I can select this button, I can right click, and I can copy it. Now I can copy it with mates if I want, or I can just copy it in place. So we're not going to copy it with mates because we want it to go differently. So I'm just going to go Control C, Control V. You can see down here I've got a new button. I may just name it something else. Huh. Interesting. My naming convention is turned off. So, anyways, I'm going to select that. I can move it. And then I'm going to continue to do that mate. Now, what I can do is not everything has to be mated to this part. I could just mate the surfaces to each other. So if I want to, come on, stop. Let me hide that. Because this button still moves around. Let me hide that. What I could do is mate this surface to this surface. So really, it doesn't matter where you made it as long as it sticks in place. Now, the one thing is, if I wanted to move, since this button is now mated to this button, if I moved this button, then that would move up and down with it. So depending on what you want to do, there may be times where you want to mate all the individual components to each other. Okay, so let me just continue here. I want to bring up a few other buttons. Let me bring up. So this is also one of those things you can see when, I mean, Simon did a good name of naming his parts, but you could see if he hadn't named his parts, then I would be struggling a lot more to find the items, because I wouldn't even, I would just have to kind of turn things on and off as I went. But it also helps if I do that. There we go, that's it. So what I can do is continue to do all that and place everything where they need to be. What I can also do, I believe, let's go up here. We're in assembly. I can also mirror my components. So let's say I want to make a sub-assembly. So an assembly within an assembly. And what I want to do is I want to turn on all my buttons. So there's that button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select those two buttons. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go form new sub-assembly. So what it does is it automatically puts that button in there. So what I can then do is grab this button and place it in there. And what I'm doing now is it's a sub-assembly because those are all the components that I want. Those are all the buttons, let's say. That they're always going to be related to each other in some way, shape, or form. Same with, a lot of times you'll see this when you have a whole bunch of screws. If you've all got, 5mm pan head screws throughout your model, they will make a sub-assembly of that. Or it could be as larger of a sub-assembly as in this column is always, joined together as a variety of things. So if you were to assemble this, you would have the column all assembled with all the components, and then that column would get attached to the front face. So you can kind of start breaking them out from a manufacturing kind of standpoint. I don't know if we're going to worry about that too much at this point or give that too much thought. But what I was going to show you was the nice thing is if I put all these buttons in and they're all one assembly, much like in the other model, I can take this assembly, I can come up and do linear components, and then I can mirror it. I'm going to select the plane to mirror on. And now you can see that they show up here. So I can still make changes. It's still in my menu tree. There's my mates, there's my mirror component. And that just allows me to be a little bit more efficient with my time. So I'm not trying to mate every single button or to put that in every single space. So let me just turn on all the parts here. Oh, and you can see for some reason I have a column floating off in space here. But again, so let's just do a quick mate. Now, when I did concentric, it doesn't have to be, I don't have to select the inside of this and the outside of that. It doesn't matter. All I need to know is that these ones are supposed to be concentric. Oops, and you can see that it's, oh, that's a new feature. Hold on. So a new feature. Because I'm in the assembly layout, I don't actually have to click the mates. It looks like I can just click right down there. So nice. So I'm not sure. You know what? I'm just going to assume that that face mates up to that face. So now it's still in that position, but I can still rotate it. If I didn't want it to rotate, then what I would do is I would take its planes, because you can see that this right plane rotates with the part, because those planes are specific to that part. If I don't want that to rotate, what I'll do is I'll grab that right plane, and I'll grab that right plane for the assembly and make them parallel. And now it can never do anything. So now you can also see when I go to select the part, it says it is a fully defined component and cannot be moved. That means because I've locked it in the, let's say, front to back position, I've locked it in the up and down, and I've locked it from a rotation standpoint. So that kind of also, I don't have to worry about moving it accidentally or having it misaligned, or when I'm fitting up all my bosses and screws, everything is going to fit properly. What else did I want to cover here? So always, you're going to have to make sure you file save as. We'll just call it assembly rev A. Later on, down the road, before the next project, what I'll show you is how you could mate this all in space, but advanced mates would allow you to rotate this so you can do renderings or animations in here. But the next thing I wanted to show is, so I've saved this out. I want to, and I can't remember if it's going to do it for me or not. Let me, so this is Simon's model that I brought in from SolidWorks that was the solid body. So you can kind of see over on the right hand side here, come on, that there's no real names to everything. They just kind of brought it in, and there's none of the body name components to it. It just kind of brings it in dead, which then matches up or aligns with, you know, even though Simon named them, they're not going to come in that way. So I think, though, if I open the assembly, come on, don't do this to me, SolidWorks. There we go. If I take this assembly and I bring that into KeyShot, let me just see here because it's not add-ins. There we go. Oh, it says it's there. Who can find my KeyShot window? Okay, so let's try this a different way. I will just simply close out KeyShot, and I'm going to try just to open the assembly versus exporting it out. My goal is that when it brings this in, because it's coming in from the assembly and each component has its own proper name, that I can come over here and now you can see that everything has its name, which makes life so much nicer when you're doing a larger rendering. That it's almost of value to put it into an assembly if you have a whole lot of components. Because as shown before, I didn't know what anything was. I would literally have to hold my mouse over it, see what it highlighted, or I'd have to select the handle, find it in the model set tree, menu tree, whatever you want to call it. So by naming things by saving each body and giving it a proper name when you save it as a new part, and then bringing it into the assembly, when you import that assembly, all those names stay and come in. So that can be nice when doing a rendering for large assemblies. I've asked clients before, and I have said, you know, if you do this, it will save you 2 hours worth of my time, which basically equates to, hey, you're going to save yourself a lot of money by doing it yourself. If not, it's going to take me longer to do. And sometimes, you know what, their engineers don't have time, so more money for me, which is not bad, but I don't think any of us like tedious work. It's not fun sitting here and renaming everything. Whether you're being paid for it or not. There's other things I'd rather get paid for. So that is kind of Assembly 101. Questions? No questions.
I have a question. So for the assignment, like right now, or the project that we're working on right now, do you want us to break up like parts like this then?
Yeah, right now your model should have multiple bodies in it. So just
Okay.
and then each one of those bodies You probably don't have as many as Simon did for yours, Amanda. But this round, you should be breaking your model into the various components that would make it up. If you hadn't done that already in your CAD model, you'll want to do that. And then you're going to save those all out, like I showed, and then bring them in and create an assembly with it. Because I believe the brief outlined that what was due was for you to submit an assembly with your changes that you've made. And with that said, let me just go over this one more time. So if I'm going to come in here, I've got my entire assembly. I've got all my components. I'm going to come up. I'm going to go File, Pack and Go. So I'll click on that. Ignore whatever that is, the manager library. It will pull up a menu here. It should pull up a menu. What the hey? Okay. If anybody can do a quick test, you know what? Let me just try something here. I'm just going to try to get out. I don't know why it was doing that. If everybody else is going to have that problem, it's going to, well, no. So if you can't use the pack and go, basically what's going on here, then what you have to make sure you do is take all the files for your model, the parent model, all the individual part models, and the assembly model, and you have to make sure you upload those all into one folder in your Google Drive. What I'm trying to show you with the pack and go is it just does, it's like WinZipping something. It just makes life easier. Let's see if this works. Okay, let's see if it'll go now. File, pack and go. I am the administrator. Okay, so if you experience this problem where it says document manager library is invalid, I'll tell you right now I'm not going to be able to help you with that because I have no clue what it even means other than it's all it works can be a pain in my butt sometimes. So you'll just have to make sure that all the parts that you've saved in one folder, upload them to your Google Drive. And ideally what I would ask is for you guys to zip them into one full file. So for example, if I'm going to come in here, you know, if these are my parts along with the assembly file in there, just grab them all and then archive them or do an archive. Use your proper name, whatever it needs to be. Zip it up. Seriously? Oh, shoot. Okay. I can't do it because it's actually open. So let me just close this out. I didn't realize that was...
Hey Chevis, I found a forum for that issue you were having. I don't know if it'll work or if there's anything to fix it, but it's in the resources link.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Sweet. So if you guys have that issue, take a look at it if you can fix it. If not, just do what I'm showing you here. The biggest difference when you do the pack and go, if it will take, when you have that assembly, it will take everything. Doesn't matter what folder it's in, where it's in. If it's associated to that assembly, if you've got 2D drawings, if you've got spec sheets, the 3D parts, FEA analysis, when that window pops open, it says, do you want everything to be part of this? And you can click what you want and don't want, but it'll make sure that if you want all of that stuff, it all goes right in, because there are times where, you know, your 2D drawings may be saved somewhere else. So that's just the nice feature of the Pack and Go, is it just exactly that. It packs absolutely everything up that you want, puts it into one nice little file, zips it up, and then sends it. So you end up with this exact same thing. The difference is it reduces the chance that you miss a file. You know, for those of you that have sent me just the assembly file, by doing the Pack and Go, you'll never forget to send the parts. Other questions?